Hello everyone, my name is Sarrah West, and I'm going to be speaking today about Uranus transits. So here we go. So first off, I wanted to point out the symbols that represent Uranus in the charts. Because interestingly, recently I was looking at a chart from someone I think who comes from Europe, and they had this symbol here with the circle, with the dot, with the arrow up on top. And somebody had to tell me what it was. And so I thought, well, it might be good to be sharing what those symbols are that we use for discussing Uranus in the charts. So wanted to share that, put it out there. I also wanted to talk about just going over some of the archetypes that are present in as we're discussing Uranus, and it can take a lot of forms. So I want to kind of go over these real quickly. There's many out there. I just took some of the more popular ones that seem to come through, and have this out there. So the first one is the Awakener. That's a very common one that we hear about for Uranus, and also individuality or individualism, individual, and rebel with a cause. We also tie it to the genius and innovators of our time or in the past, or also the cosmic trickster can take on that shape as well. The unexpected and Prometheus, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Prometheus here in my next slide. And breakthroughs or breakdowns, I think many of us have used that language around Uranus when we're having Uranus transits. As well as liberation, especially from considering Saturn. Uranus gives us the liberation from what has been, and has the it's the breakthrough. There's the language again. Technical and electrical also is part of the archetype, being discovered as we unfolded the Industrial Revolution. Also change is the constant. Uranus is a part of that. And universal mind and long-term memory. And that one comes up a lot with Mark Jones's teachings. Just a quick little notes on the cycles of Uranus. 84 years orbit around the sun, 7 years through a sign. We experience Uranus squares at the age of 21 and 63, and the ever popular Uranus opposition at age 41, 42. A midlife crisis, this time often people language it that way. So there's the cycles. So going into what I thought I wanted to explore around Uranus to kind of show it in a couple different lights, so we get a grasp of these archetypes that I was just discussing. Richard Tarnis has a book, and it actually came out of a 1978 essay. So it reaches pretty far back. And he shared that essay in multiple formats. It's a really short book here, but he finally published this after many requests. It's brilliant little short volume. And I took a few pieces out of it that I thought were really good as it relates to how he looks at how he looks at Uranus from the Prometheus archetype image. So here's the quote. Without a conscious internal Saturn, one defines oneself according to images imposed by and evoked from external authorities. With the integration of Saturn, one is oneself, the origin of one's own definition. Then Saturn as an external inhibiting force is no longer necessary, and a tremendous weight is removed. To integrate Saturn is to free Prometheus. Conscious integration allows full expression of Prometheus and can engender what is often experienced as a revolution in consciousness, a sense of extraordinary existential liberation, mental and intuitive brilliance, enlightenment. Prometheus unbound. Prometheus is the channel of the creative impulse within every psyche. In its highest manifestation, it may be regarded as the impulse toward the full realization of the self, the creation of a complete human being. For Prometheus's fire is ultimately the fire of life itself. The Greeks recognized Prometheus as humanity's creator. Thus, Prometheus begins his task as the trickster by the little accident that disrupts the reign of the status quo, by the neurotic symptom that upsets the ego's hold on things, by the bits of information that an orthodox scientific paradigm is uncomfortably unable to account for. And this knight errant, this Robin Hood in the eye of the establishment, completes his task as the awakener, who serves as the initiator into the archetypal awareness, the enlightener of his culture, and the vehicle of our liberation. And I thought that was very poignant in what I wanted to kind of draw out on this Uranus discussion today. Going further, this is some thoughts from Mark Jones in his book, Healing the Soul, Pluto, Uranus, and the Lunar Nodes. Past life trauma includes those prior life memories held within the long-term memory, which is signified by Uranus, Aquarius, 11th house. The Uranus archetype corresponds to the individuated unconsciousness of the individual. This deep state of the unconscious symbolized by the Uranus archetype can be brought towards conscious awareness through the attention and focus of the individual as part of the process of individualization. Just as this subtle mind can manifest trauma, so it can function as the basis for the realization of the field of reality in which we live. This subtle mind can be likened to a magnetic presence of a certain type of quality, existing with an overall vast, perhaps infinite magnetic field. The individual magnet, this individual consciousness, can recognize the nature of the overall field and gain support from that. In this way, we are life experiencing itself through us, life enjoying life. This ultimate context, the overall field of reality, provides a backdrop of meaning that can help us contextualize our personal life experience, including our most traumatic memories and experiences. And I wanted to kind of bring those together as we go into further exploring Uranus transits. So I have other materials before we jump into Olive's chart here. There's a book by Jeff Green that I also referenced for some of this, but I found carryover in a lot of the information, but it's also a great resource to add to the mix here. Anyway, so in discussion with Olive, I did pulled a report out of my software to uncover her hard aspects to Uranus, her Uranus transits. So we kind of picked, based on our discussion, I picked a few dates and we can dive into this and looking, I kind of put some arrows in the chart so it's easier to pull out. So the first one that I wanted to bring out was her adoption day. And the reason I thought that this is important is, and it's completely in the deepest part of her unconscious because she was an infant, but I thought it was important because of the fact that Uranus was stationing direct 2 days after her adoption day on May 31st. So I wanted to bring this out just to kind of explore. There's not going to be a lot of movement from the transit per se in this particular chart because the inner wheel is the natal chart, the external is May 31st, but there are other components that I wanted to point out. First of all, how important looking at progressions are when we're considering transits, because sometimes something will not be really easily seen, but you can see that this pulled on May 31st is showing it retrograde, but if you look in the ephemeris 2 days later, you can see that it's gone direct. And that I think is pretty significant for the deep memory piece that we have here. You also can see in her natal, we have Uranus and Mercury in a square. Well, the Pluto is at 20, Mercury is in 19, but it does pull in the Uranus. So I kind of look at that as a group together in square to Mercury sitting on the Ascendant. And I thought that was important because it does click over into the next sign on her adoption day. And the moon is also at the very beginnings of Leo. And the moon is a significant because it is ruled by Uranus in where it sits in the ninth house in her natal chart. Also movement with the midheaven coming to her sun, and the sun and is just past Mars, but I don't know if that's significant, but I think it's more that the Mars is coming closer to her squaring this set down here. So that's possibly some of the threads, this is probably the best way I could describe it, some of the threads going into the deep memory of the unconscious as an infant. So I don't know if you want to add anything there, Olive, but I just wanted to start off with that to kind of explore those those first couple of days, because it was, 13 days after you were born, I think?
It was adopted 13 days later, yeah.
So
you can go ahead. I want to try to limit my talking.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one. I just want to kind of set that as a foundational stone here. So, okay, we're on to the next one. Now, we don't have to expand upon this one, but you did mention it in our conversation.
Oh, no, if you want to ask me a question, I just want to be mindful of my ramble. So if you ask me a question.
Yeah. So we were exploring just certain things across her, the dates that I had pulled in the report. And she had mentioned 1987, the day after her birthday. And I was like, well, okay, what do I've got going on there in the chart? And so this was an important adult moment in her life. And so do you mind if I ask you and you can share?
No, you don't. I'm open, honestly.
Go ahead.
Totally.
Yeah.
I lost my virginity a day after my 19th birthday. So nodal return. And so May 19th of 1987.
Yeah.
I lost my virginity.
And what's interesting to me is how close it is with the nodal return happening. You can see at the top of the chart, we have the node in Aries approaching her node at 17 Aries. And so that's interesting, kind of a moment there to kind of reflect on that. But also what I found interesting was Jupiter's in the mix and expansion, like you're taking on your own personal authority in that moment, and but also we can see that Uranus is across the chart in the seventh house in Sagittarius. Yeah, like a moment of liberation and into relationships and the adventures with others. So yeah, you can add on. Go ahead.
Oh, nothing, but that's very accurate. Yeah, I think it was opposite my ascendant. And be mindful, I can't see what you're presenting, but Uranus on my opposite my ascendant. And yeah. So you're square, like my first Uranus square. Yeah.
And you also have Saturn coming up behind it at 19 degrees Sagittarius, but they're both in retrograde. So it's like they've gone over the descendant line and opposite the ascendant, and then we'll go back over again. So there's like this transiting happening, liberation, but also understanding boundaries and your own self-authority around boundaries is going on in this time frame, and but also your midheaven tucking into the 12th house there at 16 Taurus, right over coming to your Venus. And that's also kind of like maybe you shared it with others, but it being in the 12th house, I don't know how public this was shared with friends.
I'm always public. I've never ever been a private or secretive person, so I'm sure I shared it with many.
At the same moment, we have also Chiron within 1 degree or 1 degree and 37 minutes of your ascendant. So it's coming, and so there will be some something around that. I don't know, coming out of the 12th. Out of Gemini, I don't know if there's new information that you're getting from the experience or how you may language and communicate through differently from this. It is just past your Mercury, so I don't know how it influenced it, your mental, your communicative self, and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I must say I've never actually looked at my virginity chart, but I can't see it, but that all makes sense. I didn't know Chiron was there, so it was crossing my ascendant.
Yeah, it's within a degree, but it's also just past your Mercury, which is the ruler of the ascendant, so that there's something about something going on, I think, from the 12th house perspective of behind the scenes, maybe secretive to some point, maybe communication, secret communication, but maybe possible also addressing something at a deeper level with the Chiron involved there. And maybe how you are maybe identifying with that as it approaches and goes past into your first house. But being a wild, I don't know how we want to go there.
Yeah, no, it's all very interesting information.
Also, the moon is in Aquarius and has just, I don't know the time. I think I made these noon chart for the day, so it's not like purely accurate, to the moment. But
I lost my virginity around probably around midnight.
But
so almost like 20. It's almost like 20th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have the moon is in lunar month return kind of moment. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and
Mars, I didn't know that.
Being in Gemini first house, 29 degrees, is like the the will, the free will taking place around the self in that moment. So being expressed. So okay, we'll go on to the next one. All right.
Yeah, that's all very fascinating. I'll have to pull my virginity.
Oops, sorry about that. I have this coming online. Sorry about that. Okay, the next one is a quite an important moment in Olive's life on September 29th, 2000. So we have the natal on the inner wheel and the transits on the outer wheel. And do you want me to just go into the information and ask you questions, Olive?
Yeah, it's probably better if you just guide me because I want to be mindful of my ramble. But go ahead.
So first, I have the red arrow on Uranus, so you can see it's approaching her natal moon in the 9th house in Aquarius. So it's in the sign it rules and going over the sun. It's in a retrograde moment here. So it's gone over once. I think this is the second hit going back. It's going back to go over the final. So in this moment is when Olive, I think you're at school. You've joined a photography school.
Yeah, I was in photography. I had re-enrolled in photography school at that time, and it was really that day that my dad called me that I told you.
Right.
I had a lot of stuff going on with that Uranus on my moon, but yeah, that was for sure. It was like day one of my class. Right. And I just paid obviously a lot of money. So.
Right. Now, I can't recall from our conversation, did you have to fly home? So he must have.
Yeah, so that actually was my first flight, which is interesting, I guess, since boarding school. So it is interesting because I was in school, the first day of school, I had just enrolled, and I was at one of my photography teachers, she was having a dinner party, and I was at her house, and actually that was the day or maybe I did have my cell phone. I guess I must have had a cell phone because I had a cell phone in the 90s. So, but my father called me while I was at this dinner party later that night and told me that I had to that he purchased a ticket, I needed to fly home, my mother was apparently dying, which I didn't really know that she was dying because she had had cancer and things had been kind of remedied, and I was in contact with both my parents, but my dad would kind of keep my mom, just I was never given any information that my mom was dying is the gist of it. So so the next day, obviously, because my mom was on her deathbed, I had to suck it up and get on a flight home to LA. So I did, and so that was the first time I flew since my boarding school days. The last time I had flown before that was 14.
Okay. So you had to fly home. I don't remember how far you had to fly, but basically it sounds like you had
2.5 hours. Just Seattle to LA, not a long flight.
Okay, not too bad. We can also see in this chart the Uranus is in aspect also to the Ascendant. So there's, you know, a lot going on with the identity in this moment. But I want to concentrate also on the Saturn in Gemini at 0 degrees, but it's going retrograde. So it's going to probably go back over the sun in this moment. So it's the father telling you, but there's kind of like a lot of secrecy around your mother's health in this, this experience where you weren't given a lot of information. It was kind of held away from you until the last moment, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so
Yeah.
it's kind of surprising that it was relayed like that. And I also kind of tie in the Mars going in the 4th house. It's squaring itself because in your natal chart, it's at 7 degrees Gemini. So they're having
So was Mars at 7 degrees Virgo that day?
at 8 degrees Virgo. So it was perfectly squaring itself. And
yeah,
on top of that, you have Jupiter had just passed the Mars within the 3-day period. So about that. So is it the Jupiter in transit was at 11 Gemini, also in retrograde in the 12th, gonna go back over probably the Mars. So there's a lot of stimulation of your Mars, stimulation of the moon, stimulation, you know, through those transits. And also down in the 4th house, the midheaven has come around and has, I don't have an arrow on this one, but the midheaven has also touched directly onto your Uranus. So this is a very pointed moment around your archetype of Uranus and how you're experiencing it from the deeper, you know, level in the 4th house, so close to your Pluto, and somewhat public because the midheaven has come down and touching that. So having the call come and then you're at a dinner party, and so some people are aware of you having to go home and attend to this, right?
Yeah, everyone at the dinner party was,
Yeah, so a bit public.
Yeah.
And also the moon in transit is conjunct exact 1 degree with Mercury in the 5th in Scorpio. I noticed that. So there's a deepening.
And then I have Juno there too, I think.
You have 0. Juno in 0 degrees Scorpio. So something about the commitment with the mother. What's interesting is what you shared with me about the kind of the last moments with your mother and how she had, you know, some kind of response to you being there. And she's almost like communicating at such a deep level, and you're getting some information about this. I don't know if it hit you then or if it hit you later, but there's definitely some kind
of... It hit me much later, just 2 years ago. You mean what I told you about how she kind of rides up and all that? Yeah.
Because I think that's the moon and this experience with the connected to so closely with the Mercury in Scorpio.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So
so I just got revelation just, you know, like 2 years ago, like I told you. So I wasn't really aware back then.
Right. So it took time to.
Yeah. And interestingly, you had mentioned the Saturn at 0 degrees Gemini when my mom died, and it kind of ties into really not this time right now, but like a couple years ago when it went back in as a Saturn opposition to my mother's death. I knew that I knew for a fact that my father wouldn't be able to get to a full like nodal return. So I knew he would die around that kind of Saturn opposition time for my mother's death. And so I was really kind of waiting for that zero degree opposition again. Right. So go ahead.
Other points that are in this chart that making, you know, how deep the experience is going around kind of your consciousness, because this is like a consciousness moment kind of being stimulated, trauma or liberation or understanding or something coming to light. There's a bunch of ways that this comes into play. Some you get and then you don't uncover it for many years, right? Like, so that it can happen that way. But we have there's a couple of things from a deeper perspective. We have Eris, which is a up there right on your north node, and in between Saturn at your natal Saturn at 20 degrees Aries, and 17 of your north node in Aries, and Eris in transit at 19 Aries. And you had shared that some things about your father, like your mother's responding in this bodily way, not verbally, and you're getting some kind of an awareness, but not really uncovering it for many years later about that connection and perceptions around the father, which you also don't uncover for many years later. So it's almost like it's the stimulation, but not full awareness. And I also see with the Pluto at 10 degrees Sagittarius in the 6th, opposite the transiting Jupiter, is, you know, also a part of the mix here because of how deep it goes in the 12th house. You know, the Jupiter in the 12th house, those are kind of playing a part there in the opposite, you know, opposite signs. And also Chiron at 12 degrees is so close to the Pluto at 10 degrees. They're a part of that as well. And 6th house around possibly health, but also belief systems or whatnot. I think it's all of those, truth and natural laws and things like that. Is there anything else I wanted to pull out of this chart? I think we covered everything, right?
Yeah.
Conversation.
It was very fun.
Yeah. So that's important. And as you can see, kind of Uranus was our step into that, and it's so pointed there. Okay, next slide. So this was kind of into the future, as Olive was talking about how she had some information that came to her in the moment around her mother's death, but yet some things did not come to light until much, much later. And so when Uranus is transiting her nodes, April 9th of 2015, she has some really significant revelations around the father, and we can see a lot going on here with the sun in Aries, Mercury, and the sun. Mercury is actually Cazimi to the sun, and also it's on top of the Saturn and the north node, which is opposite the south node, so there's a lot going on there. And the nodes are also ticking, have just passed, because it goes the other way. They have passed what would be a half return, right? So it's past that, but we have Uranus coming in, being conjunct the north node, natal north node. But we also have Venus in Taurus transiting over the sun exact. So we have a lot of exact points here. And there was another one here. The Jupiter.
I also had Neptune square my Mars, I think.
Say again?
I think also Neptune may have been square my Mars that day.
Yeah, well, it's Pisces. Yes, that is correct. I didn't catch that one. You beat me to it. So I also saw that transiting Venus is also square your natal Jupiter in Leo, and you're in a Jupiter return year. So a lot of things going on around, and so I see how the sun is being called out here a lot from the Leo archetype and the squares to certain things, and but there's also kind of a new revelation around what you value, but also kind of the relationship to the father. So you want to go into that and kind of your version of that, your experience there?
So on April 9th, I opened my garage door in my childhood home, and my father had thrown out just everything, and there was so much in that garage, just everything, like anything of my mother, like, you know, who was dead, and all her Christmas ornaments, like beautiful vintage Christmas ornaments, you know, like her wedding dress, and just like everything, very valuable stuff, and then just also very sentimental stuff. And he did that as like a retaliatory act, which he admitted sometime thereafter, but he did it as like this retaliatory act because 2 weeks prior I had been in LA and I had said some kind of mean stuff to him in the hospital. I think I had said, don't suffocate me, like in a mean way. I had said, like, please don't suffocate me from the grave, like when you die or something like that. And so he had all that stuff, everything of value, sentimental value, just tossed like to a dump. He just had people come remove it and completely gutted the garage. And I, throughout like my whole life as an adult, because I moved out probably like days after I turned 18, had kind of brought stuff from wherever I lived as that being my home, because, you know, I was born and raised there. And so I always considered it, you know, a safe place to keep my things. And lo and behold, they weren't safe. And so it was like this really sudden, like, revelation, sudden, shocking, upsetting trauma, very Uranus, North Node kind of stuff. And it was definitely traumatic, and I'm still pretty traumatized from it, actually. And I haven't even really been able to grieve that part of it, like the loss of my stuff, right? I'm a Taurus, so like my stuff, but and you know, fourth house Pluto, the sentimental value, but then like 2 weeks later, you know, coming into like birthday transits, I had this other revelation. Like, I found out that my father had narcissistic personality disorder, which, as much as I've always known about narcissism and narcissistic traits, I had no clue about the disorder, even though I had studied abnormal psychology and had like a million revised editions of the DSM. I just had no clue how markedly different the two were. And so it's been really the last 2.5 years, like just trauma after trauma. And so it's all very Uranian, very straightforward.
Yes.
And quite profound, actually. Like, it's just so 1 + 1 is 2.
Mm-hmm.
You can just see it. It's like not a guessing game, or
right.
It's just boom right there. So yeah.
You see how you're fully activated in this moment. I just got 2 more that I don't have arrows on, but the moon at the moment, I think, again, this is a noon chart, so it's going to be pretty close, is opposite your Mercury, which is your ascendant ruler. So self-identity is really, there's a tension of the opposites here with the moon in Sagittarius at 20 degrees. Right, you know, across from your ascendant. But those also, Saturn is applying to an opposition within 3 degrees of your natal Mars. So again, it's interesting. That's the garage, you know, the 4th house or the 12th house. You're going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I know.
And the Venus, you know, the valuables, the sentiment, you know, it's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just so. If it weren't so traumatic, it's just very comical. Actually, it's so straightforward.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The interesting, you call out the Neptune in the 10th.
Yeah, the loss. Yeah.
The loss, but it's really like a T. It's coming into a T-square as Saturn moves up. That would absolutely be like a T-square, kind of like felt like it came out of nowhere, and
it really
wiped out.
Yeah. I mean, it was so shocking. And the thing is I had prepared for this. Like, I didn't prepare for this, not the garage thing, but I knew my father was going to die around that time when Pluto got to my 8th house cusp. I knew all this really for at least 2 years prior to his death. I knew he'd die around January of 2016, and he died December 30th of 2015. So, but like Uranus, right? It's like, expect the unexpected. Like, I had no clue that was going to happen. I knew all other stuff, but that was like, you know, just so Uranian. It's like, expect the unexpected. So I was prepared for some of the pain, the trauma, the shock, you know, upsets, whatever. But I was completely blown away about, you know, the garage and learning my father had, or just really just learning about narcissism in general, the disorder. It's it was just very unexpected. Like, in a million years, I would have never thought that would happen. So it was very straightforward Uranus, you know?
Uranian. Yeah.
Yeah, very Uranian, like just very Uranus conjunct my North Node.
Right. And I think
11th,
how big it was and how surprising it was, it would take time to sift through that to get to the point where you may find other awareness and where that may take you. I think that's you're still in process, right? I mean, this is not too long ago.
I mean, I'm definitely, you know, it's been, you know, a lot of trauma, like a
Mhm.
lot of upsets and traumas for sure. And I still haven't even grieved like my stuff, right? Because like just only a couple weeks later, I found out, you know, just how disturbing my,
Right.
you know, the revelation of the sudden revelation of, holy shit, your father's been your secret enemy your whole life. You know, I
Mhm.
just wondered why I had never had secret enemies, being so 12th house,
Mhm.
and so like sudden revelation, like, oh my God, you do have a secret enemy, and it's your fucking father. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So yeah, it was very Uranian, very straightforward, and
Yeah. And as you're calling it out, it's as the time went by that Saturn in the sixth is going to apply, you know, to the opposition to the Mars. So that's the anger part of it. But then it's going to be in opposition to the Sun as well. And so
right.
in the mix as time went by in that year. Um, so,
Yeah.
anything else you want to add?
No. No.
So I think that's the last one on all of that I have, and then I think we have enough time. We have enough time. I created a few charts from transits of my own chart, since I have Uranus going over the ascendant right now. So here we go. So inner wheel is natal chart, external is transits. So this is May 27th, 1974 on the transit chart. And the reason I wanted to bring this out is a couple of things are happening around this timeline in life. My sister is born, that's the date of her birthday. And so you can see that Uranus is in transit in the sixth house at 24 degrees Libra, 10 minutes, but in retrograde. So it's already hit my descendant and then coming back over. And that spring before my sister was born, I think maybe 2 months before, my whole family had moved from Spokane out to the country, very rural, about 20 minutes drive or so from Spokane. So the whole family's moving. So that's a Uranian event around descendant at a young age that's coming out through the parents doing something. Which is interesting. In later that year, my sister at 9 months, so I think my mom said it was January of 1975, she became severely ill with spinal meningitis, and she was put into the ICU. And for the Uranus transit here, I want to point out, because it's going to cross the descendant at 24 degrees, and then it's going to hit into Scorpio. And that's about the time that it's opposite my moon and my Saturn, around that January of 1975. But I wanted to kind of start with the story of my sister, because when my sister got that sick, she was in the ICU for like 14 days. And so there definitely, I was 5 years old at this time. She's my first sister, and I had two other older brothers, one younger brother, but it was really noticeable that my parents were pulled away, and also that they were highly concerned about, you know, she could have died. It was that bad. The first 24 hours, they thought she might not make it, but she did. But you can see in the moment that my sister, I think, is a part of the ascendant with that Venus just crossing over, and Chiron right there on my ascendant. I thought that was interesting. This is opposite, you know, this opposite thing going on with the Uranus transit and Venus and Chiron together there. And also the Jupiter is right smack on my North Node in Pisces, which, you know, my Venus is square my nodes. So this is tucking into that whole nodal story. And my sister is very tied to, I think, family fourth house stuff that we had to move through. I shouldn't say we had to move through, that we did move through. And the nodes are also right here smack on the Venus, which is my skip step. So it's kind of like this moment in time being kind of sparked around these themes. And my Uranus is in the sixth house. So it's now moving in, it's been moving up into the seventh house. So it's kind of reminds me around health issues that create fear, and also that's noticeable in what I'm picking up from my parents. And this storyline actually carried forward later in life when we have other stories in the family around health issues and scares and fears around that and the fragility of life. Also, I pointed out Mercury here is at 27 degrees. Gemini, which is opposite my sun. My sister was born as a Gemini. So there's a tension across that between the Mercury and the sun, and the transiting Mercury and the sun, and her being a sibling. So I wanted to point that out. I think I caught everything there. Okay, so that's one event, kind of sharing a few of the Uranian themes. Here's the next one. This is August 13, 1983. Uranus is, I wanted to bring out this chart because Uranus is stationing direct this day after stationing retrograde in March 9th of 1982. This is the kind of year my last full sister was born. She was born in July of 1982. But 1983, my parents separated, and it was a big change for the family dynamic and set into play a lot of other events, Plutonian and Uranian. But in this, you can see the Uranus is at 5 degrees Sagittarius. It's gone retrograde. And it's in the 8th house, ruled by Scorpio, which is Pluto. And you can see Pluto is sitting right on the, just past my descendant at 27 degrees Libra. And also Saturn is right there. So heavy duty transformation around the father at 29 degrees Libra, and the relationship with my mother, because like it's 29 Libra also for the moon when I took this. So this is a key moment as well around how the Uranian event is, but it's all, this is a combination between the Uranus sudden information about the father and how that separation is trickling through the family, and then also how transformation it will be in how I, as a young woman, I think I'm 13 at this point, will take that information into my unconscious about relationships, and how they talk about the projection that Vanessa was talking about from the counseling side, but that's going into the unconscious mind at that moment about we will probably project that need out onto another individual and how we may look at other authority figures and so forth, with that kind of in the mix. I also noted in this chart series the relationship around the grief of the mother archetype series has just come past my natal series at 16 degrees. So that is also in the mix here. And then the south node in Sagittarius at 23 Sagittarius has just passed my sun, and is heading towards my Venus, which will also be another kind of cross of my nodes, because the Venus is my skip step. So there's impact there. And also the Neptune. I'm not going to go into the depth around the Neptune storyline here as it relates to my own personal drama, but definitely going on here around personal boundaries and absolutely changing fundamentally what I thought about religion, because there was very strong storylines around religion and what I experienced with my parents, and observing my mother and how the community around her and how that just completely changed and dissolved what I believed. And it was just kind of the first moment, but it kind of kept growing over time as I released that thinking. Also in this chart, the transiting Venus is at 7 Virgo, and that is squaring the Uranus. So this kind of Uranian moment in relating to values and also, I think, children, because my mom had so many children, but also siblings, and that my sister was born very close to this timeline as well. But I think it's more around values. I think that square is about values, and what's being put, kind of being considered in that moment. Just looking at time here, get 2 minutes. Mercury is also going right over the nodal axis on the south node there. So there's a strong critiquing, discernment around what's going on, related to my own self-expression, how it's kind of, it all becomes in the chaos of such, falling apart of the family unit at that time. There's a whole big change in how each of the children, including myself, are able to express or not express themselves in this kind of traumatic kind of experience and fallout. And I think that's represented there. Plus Mars in my transiting my fourth house at 0 degrees Leo. So I think that I covered enough there. On to the next. December 17th, 1987 is my senior year in high school. I'm already emancipated from my parents. 1 year before this, I left my mother's home to go into Spokane to graduate from high school by attending another high school. But what this is about, this is right as I'm turning 18 the next day. So it's like a sense of liberation. I remember feeling that I've done it. I've managed through all this mess to get myself liberated. And once I graduate, I'm really liberated. So I can see that in the sun, right before my birthday is there. And that's all trining my ascendant. I have my own, my Saturn in transit at 23 of Sagittarius as well. Also, there's like some kind of personal authority is being awakened in this moment as I kind of mature into the 18-year-old and, ready to exit, being connected in any way to the family that I feel like, but I do get drawn back, but this is still like in the mind, it's like a liberating moment. And then Uranus is right there at 26 degrees Sagittarius, and also right on the midheaven of the moment at 28 Sagittarius. So a lot of Sagittarian energy there. And the ruler of all that, Jupiter, being in Aries at 19, about ready to go across my ascendant. So I also see that the south node in transit is hitting my my Pluto at 27 Virgo. And so there's definitely a strong transformation. The sense of the internal critic is kind of quieted a little bit because of reaching that threshold. It's like meeting a threshold that I didn't know I was going to make it. But also they have the kind of awareness, but there's still kind of a maturity that still has to take place, but there's just kind of this moment. And I wanted to point that out there because of where Uranus was transiting up there in my 9th house. Okay, I think that's enough on that one. In December 10th, 2012, Uranus is 3 days from stationing direct. It went direct on December 13th of 2012. This is the first day I started my job in Portland, taking me away from my daughter for 17 months when I had to literally drive there every weekend. And so I only got to see her on the weekends, and I got to have her, 50% of the time in the summer of 2013 until I finally made it home from getting an opportunity to work from home May of 2014. So you can see the transformation or how this really affected me in my subconscious mind and feeling cut off somewhat, like from my life in that moment. This was it was super traumatic for me in the first few months. So you can see the Uranus at 4 degrees Aries is just past my Chiron at 2 degrees Aries, and it's retrograde, so it's going back up to hit it once again. I also have the Neptune at 0 degrees Pisces coming to conjunct my Mars at 2 degrees Pisces. So I'm in a spiritual process and I'm fully aware of that, but at the same time it's frustrating and I am dealing with anger issues a lot during this period of time, but I am kind of secluded a little bit at my sister's place. That gives me kind of the safe place to work through it, even though I'm separated from my daughter. I also have in this chart, in the transit, I have Saturn at 7 degrees Scorpio and the moon at 13 degrees Scorpio at this moment when Uranus is about ready to go station at this moment. Big, huge moment. So having to be responsible, but it having a depth of emotion that was really almost unbearable with the Saturn there. Also, the nodes are right, have just gone over. The North Node has just gone over my my Neptune at 29 Scorpio. So also kind of that, there was a deep connection to the depths of the raw emotion, and really having to kind of work through it. And I had the time to do it when I was away from my daughter, because it just had the space to do it. And I did go into a lot of healing when I was in Portland. That did help me through that process. So I think that's good on that one. And then finally in July of 2016, I went on a huge trip, and this is when Uranus is the first hit to my ascendant. And I remember fretting about buying airplane tickets for when Uranus was going to go over my ascendant. So still dealing with my fear, but then in my mind I said, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to do it, because it's not going to be the thing that I think it would be. It would be something else. And sure enough, that's true. On that trip, we had 14 flights, I don't know how many cabs, a train, a couple trains, and rental cars. And what was important is this was a moment of liberating from the past. And you can see the nodes totally being enacted here. With this, the South Node transit at 14 degrees Pisces, smack on my North Node at 15 degrees Pisces. And I definitely felt like this was an opportunity to heal the really emotional relationship I had at a young age from high school. So this is like a moment of liberation. So it's another way that the archetype played out, but just differently. And the day that it hit, this July, I think this was July 12th, this transit, we were flying that day, and we flew into London, and we were trying to jump up to Glasgow, but then everything got shut down for flights up to Glasgow because of weather. So everybody was being, corralled to go spend night in hotel in London. And at the last minute, we were just kind of going, no way, we're not going to sit here. So me and Peter decided that we were going to gather our stuff out, and someone helped us get it. We quickly made the decision to gather our luggage, and we got on a train at midnight and headed up to Glasgow on a overnight train. So that was a bit of an adventure, but it was kind of like the unexpected, and we helped the unexpected by taking action. So it was like a little bit of the Saturn authority in there that we're choosing what we're going to do here. We're not going to just be stuck and then getting off our itinerary. So it was kind of fun. It was a bit of an adventure and very unexpected. So anyway, that's what I had to give on the Uranus transits. Any questions? I know I shared a bunch of information with Olive, but feel free to ask a question.
Could you stop share, please?
Oh, sure.
Great.
Share. Let's see if I can do this all right. There.
I have a question.
Sure.
I noticed that you have Eris opposite your Uranus in Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just beginning to study Eris myself. So I'm curious what you think of those, what you think that does to you, or those archetypes.
Yeah, when I first came across Eris, when I really understood Eris was when I was at Stephen Forrest's retreat, and he was talking about Eris and Uranus, the Awakeners, or Chaos and Awakening. What I honed in on before, because it is across from my Uranus, but I really noticed that it was more exact to my midheaven. My midheaven being 11 Capricorn. And I kind of tied into the chaos within the subconscious mind, because it's Aries, I think, of mind as well. But it's also, there's like something to the connection to my siblings, the chaos with the siblings, because the Mercury's right on my midheaven. And I tied it into that. But it is kind of a thread there, because it is, 4 or 5, let's see here, 6, 5, 4 degrees difference, to being exact. So it's definitely present because of white orbs for Uranus, right? And I also think there's something about the mind, the 12th house, how you can get tangled up in the mind and how it relates to the health. So there's that in there. I've made that connection. But I really look at my Uranus in my 6th as a liberation of how I work in the relationships, and how I do the relationships with work. But there's definitely the chaos that can come out of the blue, which seems to come out of the unconscious mind of the 12th house kind of thing. And that's a part of it. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, thanks. That's really interesting. Thank you.
I had to work my Saturn, and I thought it was so poignant, I think, when I was reading Rick Tarnis's material about you have to do your Saturn to set Prometheus free. But even in that story of Prometheus being set free, there's a lot of pain because he gets, put out on the rack, and the painful experience of the process with the liver being poked at all the time. So, there's both going on, being set free, but it's also a process. So the more I worked my Saturn and became my own authority, because Saturn sits in my 1st house, the more I would be able to set myself free to be able to work freely as I do. Because when I was in the corporate environment, it was like being like a mouse in a trap. It's such liberating. It was to me so liberating how I manage the relationships in my work life. That enabled me to feel more liberated. So.
Right. Any other questions?
I had one quick question. How do you feel that, or do you feel that Uranus transits help to liberate the expression of your sun?
Of my sun?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's tied from, that's the ego, but there's a balance of that. But it's also the spiritual side, because I look at the sun as not just the ego part, but the spiritual part of the, our connection to spirit. And there's such a strong story about, and I have countless, when I looked at my patterns, and I think it's so powerful when you're sitting with someone to help them see all the patterns, the repeating themes that are happening across the life. And you're able to pull something out of it to help, take a look at it. And mine was that I was coming up against authority, and especially at work, where I needed to speak up, and sometimes I stubbed my toe on it, but I had to continually speak up and find that I could find my personal authority there, until I was mastering it. So now I've been in my career for 22 years in the corporate world, but I am a contractor, so I love what I do in how I do it now. But I've become an authority, so I know what I'm doing. I can work knowing that, and I bring that to the table, and that sets me free. So I have the ability to pursue other things I love, and it's also a spiritual journey. When I can see that, I can also see the spiritual value in it, even no matter what space it's taking place in. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what the playground looks like, or the stage. It's what's going on.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And I think I can bring that to clients the same way, help them see that.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Any final questions? Okay, we'll wind down. Thank you so much from all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Great job.
That was
Catch you
great,
later.
Sarah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.